As night gently descends and the rhythms of the world begin to slow, allow your mind to drift across time, to a land shaped by wind, sea, and memory. The story of Carthage is not merely one of battles and empires, but of a civilization born from the sea, nurtured by trade, and destined to challenge the greatest power the ancient world had ever known. Let your thoughts settle now, like silt at the bottom of a calm harbor. Imagine the Mediterranean Sea silent under a moonlit sky, its waves lapping softly against a curved coastline. This is where we begin. In the twilight mists of the ancient world, when ships carved from cedar glided over open waters and stars guided mariners long before maps and compasses, Carthage, the name itself even today, hums with distant echoes. To the Romans, it was a word of dread and rivalry. To modern archaeologists, it is a city buried in both sand and legend. But to the Phoenicians who founded it, Carthage was simply a new home, a promise of prosperity, a foothold on foreign shores. Long before Carthage stood tall, the Phoenicians, those masterful seafarers of the eastern Mediterranean, had roamed the coastlines in search of precious metals, vibrant dyes, and trading partners. They hailed from cities like Tyre and Sidon, where purple cloth and expert navigation made their culture both influential and elusive. From their ships, they planted small colonies across North Africa and southern Europe, leaving linguistic and cultural fingerprints wherever they landed. Among these scattered outposts, one would rise above the rest. In a region known to the Berbers as Kort Hadasht literally, New City, a small Phoenician settlement, took root around the 9th century BCE. At first, it was modest, a sheltered bay, a natural harbor, a strategic location. But it would not remain small for long. As we drift gently through the centuries, you'll discover how Carthage transformed from a colonial foothold into a sprawling maritime empire. You'll hear of its bustling markets, where traders sold ivory and incense, silver and salt. You'll wander its elegant streets and imagine temples dedicated to ancient gods like Tanit and Baal Hammon, their rituals shrouded in both reverence and controversy. You'll meet the great general Hannibal, who led his war elephants across the Alps, etched forever in the Roman imagination as the very embodiment of cunning and audacity. And you'll witness the city's final stand in the Third Punic War, when Carthage faced destruction at the hands of Rome, a moment so harrowing, it was said the earth was salted to prevent rebirth. But this story isn't just about rise and fall. It is about memory, resilience, and the way ancient voices continue to echo softly through the halls of time. Carthage lives on not only in ruins and relics, but in languages, in legends, in the names of distant cities, and in the whispered awe of those who still study its mysteries. Let your breath slow. With each exhale, imagine sailing farther away from the familiar present and deeper into the ancient past. There is no rush here. History unfolds gently, like the unrolling of a scroll or the winding of a seaside path. The story you are about to hear has been gathered carefully, like mosaic tiles arranged with precision. Every piece fits within a grander image of people and ports, of commerce and conflict, of divinities worshipped under starlit skies. This is not the story of a villainous city, as Roman writers might have told it, nor is it the tale of some exotic other. It is the human story of dreams, ambition, and the tides of fate. Tonight, you become a gentle voyager of history. Through calm seas and shifting winds, we will trace the life of Carthage's birth from Phoenician hands, its centuries of maritime mastery, its wars and wonders, its legacy and lore. So rest now. Let the past wash over you like a warm tide. In the chapters ahead, Carthage will rise a new not in stone or fire, but in the quiet theater of your mind. Sleep well as we begin. As we drift gently into the earliest chapter of Carthage's story, we must first journey farther east toward the sunlit coasts of the ancient Levant, in what is now Lebanon. Here, along the shores of the eastern Mediterranean, a civilization once flourished that would shape the destiny of Carthage long before it existed. These were the Phoenicians, people of the purple dye, the cedar forests, and the open sea. The Phoenicians were not a single kingdom, but a constellation of powerful, independent city-states: Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, Arwad. Each hugged the narrow coastline, and each prospered through maritime trade. With mountain ranges behind them and the Mediterranean before them, these people looked naturally to the sea not as a barrier, but as a highway. Even as early as 1200 BCE, these cities were already known for their craftsmanship, especially in textiles. The fabled Tyrian purple, extracted painstakingly from the murex sea snail, became a symbol of royalty and wealth. Their ships, sleek and expertly crafted, became the dominant force in regional trade. They transported cedar wood, fine linens, glass, ivory, and luxury items, weaving a commercial web that stretched across the Mediterranean world. But who were the Phoenicians, really? In their own tongue, they called themselves the Canaanites. The name Phoenician comes from the Greek phoinic, which referred to the rich purples they traded. Though we often think of them as merchants, they were also skilled sailors, artists, religious innovators, and builders of vast influence. Their alphabet, simple, elegant, and revolutionary, laid the foundation for many writing systems, including Greek and Latin. Unlike the complex pictograms of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Phoenician script used a small set of symbols to represent sounds. It was phonetic, and therefore more accessible. This innovation would echo through centuries, long after their own voices faded from the world stage. As we let time carry us forward, imagine the ports of Tyre and Sidon in full bloom. The smell of salt and cedar fills the air. Dock workers haul amphorae filled with olive oil and wine. Priests tend sacred fires in high-walled temples dedicated to Baal and Astarte. Ships, their sails billowing in the sea breeze, are loaded with trade goods bound for foreign shores. By 1100 BCE, the pressures of overcrowding and competition pushed Phoenician traders to venture farther from home. Their exploration was bold and wide-reaching. They reached Cyprus, Malta, Sicily, and even the Atlantic coasts of Spain and Morocco. These weren't just voyages of trade, they were voyages of survival and expansion. Where they found fertile land, safe harbors, and friendly conditions, they planted colonies. These outposts, small at first, became way stations along the sea routes. The Phoenicians were careful colonizers. They didn't seek to conquer or replace local populations. Instead, they often coexisted with native communities, forming hybrid societies that blended Phoenician religion, language, and customs with local ways of life. By the 9th century BCE, dozens of Phoenician colonies dotted the Mediterranean basin. Some of these would fade with time, but one in particular, planted on the Gulf of Tunis in North Africa, would become the jewel of the Western Sea. That colony was Carthage. But let us not leap too far ahead. For now, in the quiet hours of ancient twilight, we remain in the eastern Mediterranean. The cultural foundation for Carthage was being laid plank by plank, syllable by syllable, ship by ship. The gods the Carthaginians would one day worship, Tanit and Baal Hamenware, already venerated in Tyre. The architectural forms they would use, the religious rites they would practice, the language they would speak, all of it flowed westward like the tide, carried in the hulls of merchant ships and in the minds of those seeking new beginnings. It's important to understand that the Phoenicians saw the sea not as something to be feared, but as a partner. Their mythology, their economics, even their urban planning reflected this. Cities were built with harbors in mind. Religious offerings were often cast into the sea. The god Melkart, a deity of kingship and navigation, became the symbolic protector of explorers. This spiritual embrace of the ocean would deeply influence Carthage. Later, the Carthaginians would build circular harbor-scalled cathons that were engineering marvels of the ancient world. They would become famed for their mastery of shipbuilding, their naval prowess, and their ability to supply fleets across vast distances. All of these traits were inherited from their Phoenician ancestors. Let us pause for a moment now, as though watching the stars flicker above a dock in Sidon. The waves hush against the pier. A trader speaks softly to his son about the lands to the west, about new opportunities, about the dream of a city beyond the horizon. He cannot know it yet, but that dream will become Carthage. We often think of ancient empires as isolated, monolithic entities, but the world of the Phoenicians was interconnected, multilingual, multicultural. Their colonies were not islands of control, but bridges between cultures. This approach would be echoed in Carthage's own dealings with Iberians, Berbers, Greeks, and even early Romans. The ability to navigate diverse cultures, to adapt and trade rather than conquer this too, was a Phoenician gift. And yet, there was darkness as well. Phoenician religion, especially when transported to their colonies, sometimes involved rituals that disturbed later cultures, particularly the Romans. Accusations of child sacrifice to Baal Hammon have long haunted both Phoenician and Carthaginian memory. Whether these were misunderstood rites or actual practices remains debated, but the sacred fires and the Taffets outdoor religious precincts speak to a culture where the divine was often appeased through fire and blood. As the 9th century BCE approached, the city of Tyre found itself increasingly drawn into regional conflicts. The Assyrian Empire began to loom larger. Trade routes became contested. Resources grew scarce. It was in this climate-tense, dynamic, uncertain that one group of settlers, perhaps led by nobles or merchants from Tyre, sailed to the coast of North Africa. There, they found a fertile promontory with access to the sea and rich hinterlands. And there, Carthage was born. As this chapter closes, let us linger for a moment in reflection. The story of Carthage does not begin in battle or in conquest. It begins in migration, in aspiration, and in the deep blue pathways of the Mediterranean. It begins with cedar ships and purple sails, with the scent of foreign spices and the lapping of waves against a wooden hull. Sleep now, as the horizon fades. In the next chapter, Carthage will rise from the earth-end, from the dreams of those who dared to sail west. Night continues to deepen as we drift into the 8th century BCE. The sea lies calm beneath the stars, and on the gentle curve of the North African coast, a city begins to take shape, a city destined to rise beyond even the dreams of its founders. Carthage. In Phoenician, it was called Carthage, meaning new city. This name suggests optimism and purpose, as if its creators knew they were building something of lasting value. According to ancient legend, the city was founded in 814 BCE by a noblewoman named Elissa, known to the Romans as Dido, who fled from Tyre after a bitter political conflict. Her story, mythologized later in Roman literature, especially in Virgil's Aeneid, speaks of courage, exile, and new beginnings. Dido's tale begins in Tyre, where her husband, Axarbas, a wealthy priest, was murdered by her brother Pygmalion the king. Fearing for her life, Dido gathered followers and sailed westward, seeking refuge. When she arrived on the coast of North Africa, she asked the local Berber ruler for land just enough, she said, to fit a bull's hide. Cleverly, she cut the hide into thin strips and laid them end to end, encircling a hill that overlooked a natural harbor. That hill was Byrsa, and upon it, Carthage was born. Though poetic, this story likely reflects a deeper truth about the early days of Carthage. It was a settlement forged through negotiation, resilience, and ingenuity. The local Berber population's ancestors of the Amazigh Redi lived in the region. The Phoenician settlers, rather than displacing them, integrated through trade and diplomacy. Over time, this mixture of cultures would give Carthage its unique flavor. Eastern in origin, Western in environment. Byrsa Hill quickly became the urban heart of Carthage. Its elevation provided security and a view of the coastline, while the surrounding plains offered fertile land for agriculture. To the east lay the Gulf of Tunisia, wide and sheltered bay ideal for anchoring ships and conducting trade. The harbor was soon bustling with vessels from Cyprus, Sardinia, and Iberia. Amphorae were stacked high with olive oil, wine, salted fish, and exotic goods. Carthage was open for business. Carthaginian society, from the beginning, was structured and pragmatic. The city was governed by a council of elders known as the Suffet, a term inherited from Phoenician governance. These magistrates, elected from elite families, ensured that Carthage's political affairs remained in experienced hands. Unlike the monarchies of other ancient cultures, Carthage had elements of republicanism. Early in its history, a city ruled not by a single king, but by a balance of aristocracy and civic oversight. Religion, too, remained central to Carthaginian life. The chief deities were Baal-Hamon, the god of the sky and fertility, and Tanit, the goddess of motherhood and the moon. Their images adorned temples, coins, and household shrines. Religious festivals were held in their honor, accompanied by offerings of wine, incense, and in some cases, more solemn sacrifices. The sacred Tophet, an open-air sanctuary filled with urns and stelae, likely served as a burial ground for both infants and animals, dedicated in ritual devotion. As the city grew, its urban layout became increasingly sophisticated. Streets were laid out in grids. Houses were built with multiple levels and internal courtyards. Aqueducts and cisterns managed water supply. Artisans worked in bronze and gold, while scribes recorded transactions and legal codes in the Phoenician script. From the start, Carthage was a city of order and ambition. But its most powerful asset was always the sea. As Carthage matured in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, it became the dominant naval power in the western Mediterranean. Its fleets protected trade routes, transported soldiers, and projected influence across faraway coasts. Carthaginian ships were known for their speed and durability. Their designs, sleek with upward curving prows, allowed them to outrun pirates and maneuver in battle. Carthage also began to found its own colonies, much as Tyre had done centuries earlier. Settlements were established in Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearic Islands, and even along the Atlantic coast of Morocco and southern Spain. These colonies were not distant outposts. They were lifelines in a growing commercial network. They provided access to minerals, timber, farmland, and slaves, all of which flowed back to the capital in carefully organized trade convoys. The Carthaginian merchant elite became immensely wealthy. Their homes were decorated with mosaics, imported ceramics, and fine textiles. Education emphasized literacy, navigation, and civic duty. Boys were taught to sail and trade. Girls were raised with rituals of household worship and preparation for marriage alliances that strengthened political ties. In the countryside, vast estates were cultivated with olives, grains, figs, and grapes. Carthage was known for its agricultural expertise. Later Roman writers, such as Varro and Columella, would even preserve fragments of Carthaginian farming manuals. The agronomist Mago, whose work was considered the finest of its kind, became a legendary figure whose advice outlived the destruction of his city. Relations with neighboring peoples were mixed. With the Berber tribes inland, Carthage maintained trade partnerships, but occasionally clashed over territory. With the Greeks, competition for control of Sicily intensified throughout the 6th century BCE. The island was rich in resources and sat at the crossroads of Carthaginian and Hellenic interests. These early rivalries would plant the seeds of future wars. Carthage also dealt with Etruscans and early Romans, often allying with them when it suited mutual interests. Treaties between Carthage and Rome date back as early as 509 BCE. showing that the city was not only aware of Rome's rise, but sought to shape its relationships strategically. Despite this diplomacy, Carthage was wary of outsiders. Foreigners were allowed to trade, but not settle permanently. Citizenship remained a guarded privilege, extended only to those of Carthaginian blood or through long-standing alliances. Loyalty to the city and to its gods was paramount. Carthage's identity was also deeply tied to its cemeteries. The city of the dead mirrored the city of the living, with tombs arranged in ordered rows and adorned with offerings. Funerary inscriptions reveal names, prayers, and invocations in the Punic language, the Western dialect of Phoenician that became standard in Carthage. Let your imagination drift now to the early skyline of Carthage. From the crest of Bursa Hill, temple columns rise into the sky. Sailcloth flutters from masts in the harbor below. Smoke rises gently from home hearths and sacred fires alike. The scent of roasting fish mingles with burning myrrh. Life hums in every corner of this new city. By the end of the 6th century BCE, Carthage had become more than just a colony. It was a mother city in its own right, a center of commerce, politics, and power. It had outgrown its Phoenician origins and begun to chart its own destiny. But with growth came new challenges. Carthage would soon find itself drawn into conflict with the Greeks over Sicily. It would face rebellions in its colonies, and it would begin the slow shift from a merchant republic to a militarized empire in evolution, shaped by necessity, ambition, and survival. Let us pause here as the moonlight glows on the calm waters of the Gulf of Tunis. Carthage, still young, stands poised for greatness. It does not yet know of the wars to come, of Hannibal or Rome, of fire or salt. It knows only of growth, of promise, of dreams stretching far across the sea. Rest now. In the next chapter, Carthage becomes an empire not with swords alone, but with sails and silver. The stars shimmer above the Mediterranean as we continue our journey through the story of Carthage. By the start of the 5th century BCE, the city stands strong, no longer a mere outpost of Tyre, but the capital of a sprawling network of colonies, trade hubs, and naval routes. Carthage is now an empire, not one of towering armies or sweeping conquests, but of ships and sailors, markets and metals, ports and provisions. It rules not through force alone, but through mastery of the sea. In every harbor from the western Mediterranean to the Atlantic coast, Carthaginian influence is felt. Picture now the bustling inner harbor of Carthage, a marvel of ancient engineering. Known as the Kothon, it is divided into 2 great circular basins, one for merchant ships and one for the navy. The military harbor, at its center, features a grand round island with slips for dozens of warships. Each berth is fronted by a columned facade, and above the docks are storerooms filled with sails, ropes, weapons, and supplies. Above it all, an admiral's tower provides a panoramic view, allowing commanders to oversee the comings and goings of the fleet. Few ancient cities could rival such naval sophistication. To the Romans, who would one day envy and fear it, the Carthaginian harbor seemed impossibly advanced. This fleet ensures Carthage's control of the seas. Merchant vessels, sturdy and broad, carry cargoes of Spanish silver, African ivory, Sardinian grain, and Phoenician glassware. War galleys, fast and maneuverable, escort them, protect them, and enforce the city's maritime boundaries. But Carthage is more than its navy. It is an economic powerhouse. The city sits at the center of a commercial empire that spans continents. In the far west, Carthaginian traders reach the mines of Andalusia, rich with gold and tin. In North Africa, they exchange salt and tools with Berber tribes for livestock and hides. In Sicily and Sardinia, they cultivate fertile fields and harvest timber for their ever-growing fleet. Trade is the lifeblood of Carthage, and its citizens are skilled in every aspect of its navigation, accounting, negotiation. Young men are trained in the winds, currents, and constellations. Older merchants form guilds and councils, shaping the city's policies and funding expeditions. One of the most famous explorers of this era is Hanno the Navigator. According to ancient sources, Hanno leads a Carthaginian voyage along the west coast of Africa, possibly reaching as far as modern-day Senegal or even beyond. He leaves behind an account of his journey, describing strange creatures, lush forests, and the mysterious peoples of the Atlantic coast. Though later Greeks and Romans treat his writings with skepticism, they reflect Carthage's spirit of exploration and daring. Back at home, Carthaginian society becomes more stratified. A wealthy oligarchy controls much of the economy and politics. The suffetes, still elected magistrates, now serve alongside a powerful senate composed of noble families. Though technically a republic, Carthage has no single monarch instead. It is ruled by consensus, tradition, and commerce. This aristocracy funds not only the fleet, but also public works. Temples are expanded, aqueducts built, fortifications improved. A grand wall, stretching over 30 kilometers, eventually encircles the city, making it one of the best defended places in the ancient world. Inside, artisans craft exquisite metalwork and pottery. Farmers cultivate olive groves and vineyards on the surrounding plains, using advanced irrigation and crop rotation. Religion continues to play a central role in civic life. Baal Hammon and Tanit remain the patron deities of the city, and their images appear on coins and stelae. The Tophet, the sacred enclosure outside the city walls, is still in use. Here, the dead, especially infants, are buried with votive offerings. Whether this represents tragic mortality or ritual sacrifice remains debated, but its presence reflects the city's spiritual seriousness. Diplomatically, Carthage maintains a careful balance. In Iberia and Africa, it strengthens its colonies. In Sicily, it clashes increasingly with the Greek city-states, particularly Syracuse. The island is a prized possession, strategically located and rich in resources. Carthaginian armies and navies wage a series of wars to maintain their influence there. These Sicilian wars, fought over generations, are brutal and costly. Greek mercenaries face off against Carthaginian generals in a dance of siege and counter-siege. Cities change hands, treaties are signed and broken. The struggle is a preview of the far greater conflicts that will one day engulf the Western Mediterranean. And yet, despite these wars, Carthage thrives. Its population swells into the hundreds of thousands. Its architecture flourishes, with multi-story homes, paved streets, and bustling forums. Visitors describe it as wealthy, clean, and orderly, a city of marble courtyards and shaded arcades, of gardens and colonnades, of sacred precincts and vibrant marketplaces. Carthage is also a multicultural city. Berbers, Iberians, Greeks, and Phoenicians all live within its walls. Multiple languages are spoken in the markets. Foreign gods are sometimes adopted into the Carthaginian pantheon. This cosmopolitanism is both a strength and a sign of confidence, a city that does not fear diversity, but incorporates it. Still, beneath the surface, tensions exist. The lower classes feel the weight of taxation. Mercenaries, rather than citizens, make up most of the army. While the Navy is a national institution, the land forces are often outsourced, a strategy that will have dire consequences in future decades. As we pass through the final decades of the 4th century BCE, Carthage reaches the height of its economic power. Its coins circulate across the Mediterranean. Its merchants are welcomed or tolerated on every shore. Its warships cast long shadows over the sea lanes. But even now, clouds begin to gather on the horizon. To the northeast, a new power is rising. Rome. Once a small republic like Carthage, Rome is expanding rapidly, uniting the Italian peninsula and building its own fleet. For now, the two cities coexist. They sign treaties, exchange envoys, and respect one another's spheres of influence. Yet beneath this diplomatic calm lies a growing rivalry. Rome, like Carthage, is a republic. It too values order, strength, and expansion. And like Carthage, it sees the sea not as a boundary, but as an opportunity. The day will come when the two greatest republics of the ancient world, one born from Phoenician seafarers, the other from Latin farmers, will face one another across the waves. But that day is not yet here. Let your mind drift now to a quiet dock at dusk. The air is warm and heavy with salt. A ship's lantern sways in the breeze. Somewhere, a priest chants a hymn to Tanit. Somewhere else, a sailor ties a knot in preparation for tomorrow's voyage. The sea is calm. Carthage, mighty and serene, slumbers in prosperity. Rest as we prepare to witness a new chapter 1 of elephants, mountains, and war. The stars above still glimmer faintly, but the stillness of our journey begins to stir. A new wind rises not from the sea, but from the mountains, from the heart of conflict. For Carthage now enters the most dramatic and fateful chapter of its story. We stand at the dawn of the 3rd century BCE. Carthage, rich and far-reaching, has maintained its dominance across the western Mediterranean. But to the north, the Roman Republic is expanding. The two powers, once respectful neighbors, are now wary rivals. Their treaties begin to fray, their ambitions begin to overlap. The sea between them narrows. Tensions finally erupt in 264 BCE, igniting what we now call the First Punic War. It is a struggle not over ideology or vengeance, but over Sicilian island long contested, where Greek and Carthaginian interests have collided for generations. The war is long and brutal. It spans over 2 decades, with battles on land and sea. Rome, initially a land-based power, rapidly constructs a navy to match Carthage's fleet. The Carthaginians, with superior seamanship, win early victories. But Rome's determination proves unshakable. They innovate, adapt, and eventually wear down their rival. By 241 BCE, Carthage is forced to sue for peace. It surrenders Sicily and pays a massive indemnity. Rome has won, and the loss leaves Carthage weakened, resentful, and humiliated. And yet, in defeat, Carthage turns inward to rebuild. The aristocracy is shaken, the economy is strained. Mercenaries, many of them unpaid, rebel in what becomes the gruesome mercenary war. Carthage, facing internal collapse, fights desperately to restore order. It is a painful recovery. But from this crucible, a new generation emerges. Among them is a child named Hannibal. Born around 247 BCE, Hannibal Barca is the son of Hamilcar Barca, a brilliant general who had fought in the First Punic War and later led campaigns in Iberia. Hamilcar, embittered by Rome's victory, raises his son with a singular purpose: to avenge Carthage. According to ancient sources, Hannibal is brought before an altar as a boy and made to swear eternal hatred for Rome. Whether this scene is literal or symbolic, it captures the spirit of what Hannibal would become: a figure of defiance, a commander of genius, and the greatest threat Rome would ever face. Let us drift now to the rugged hills of Iberia, modern Spain, where Hamilcar expands Carthaginian influence. After his death, leadership passes to his son-in-law Hasdrubal, and later to young Hannibal himself. By 221 BCE, Hannibal commands the Carthaginian forces in Iberia. He is barely 25. With a disciplined army, skilled cavalry, and growing alliances among local tribes, Hannibal wages campaigns that extend Carthage's control deep into the peninsula. His strategic vision is bold. He understands that Rome can only be challenged by taking the fight to Italy itself. In 218 BCE, Hannibal seizes the Roman-aligned city of Saguntum in Iberia, deliberate provocation. Rome declares war, and the Second Punic War begins. Then, in one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, Hannibal leads his army numbering tens of thousands, along with cavalry and war elephants across the Pyrenees, through Gaul and over the towering Alps into Italy. The journey is harrowing, Snow, landslides, and hostile tribes decimate his forces. Many animals perish. Yet Hannibal presses on, driven by a vision that seems impossible, the conquest of Rome on its own soil. As we descend into the valleys of northern Italy, we find Hannibal's army emerging like a storm cloud. In 218 BCE, he defeats the Romans at the Battle of the Trebia. In 217, he crushes them at Lake Trasimene, where an entire Roman army is ambushed in the mist. Panic grips Rome, but the greatest victory comes in 216 BCE at Cannae. Hannibal, outnumbered nearly 2-1, executes a perfect double envelopment. Roman legions are surrounded and slaughtered. It is one of the deadliest battles in ancient history. Over 50,000 Romans fall in a single day. Hannibal is at the height of his power. Italian cities defect to his side. Allies from the south join him. Yet, crucially, Carthage fails to send sufficient reinforcements. Hannibal cannot take the city of Rome itself, not without siege equipment, supplies, and support. For over a decade, Hannibal roams Italy, undefeated in battle, but increasingly isolated. Rome adopts a new strategy, refusing direct engagements and instead cutting off his supply lines. The war shifts to other theaters, Sicily, Sardinia, and especially Iberia. Meanwhile, a Roman general named Scipio rises. Young, charismatic, and inspired by Hannibal's own tactics, Scipio campaigns in Iberia, defeating Carthaginian forces and cutting off Hannibal's base of support. Then, in a bold countermove, Scipio invades North Africa, forcing Hannibal to return home. The final confrontation takes place in 202 BCE at the Battle of Zama. Here, Scipio's well-prepared army defeats Hannibal's seasoned but under-supported troops. The war is over. Carthage sues for peace. The terms are harsh. Carthage must disband most of its navy, pay a crushing indemnity, and agree never to wage war without Roman permission. Hannibal, though spared, becomes a political leader, then a fugitive, and eventually dies in exile. Let us pause in the stillness of this moment. Hannibal, the boy who swore vengeance, the man who crossed the Alps, the general who shook the foundations of Rome, has fallen short, but his name will echo forever, both feared and admired. The Second Punic War marks a turning point. Carthage, though still alive, is diminished. Its territories are stripped, its economy weakened, its pride wounded. And yet, even now, life in the city continues. Farmers still tend the fields, merchants still sail the coasts, children still learn the stories of Baal Hammon and Tanit. The streets still hum with memory and meaning. The Roman historian Livy, centuries later, would write of Hannibal as the greatest of generals, and of Carthage as a place of discipline, endurance, and grandeur. Even in defeat, the city's legend grows. Let your thoughts drift now to the quiet shores of North Africa. The tide rolls in, and the city sleeps. Carthage has survived the wrath of Rome for now. But beneath the ashes of war, a slow fire still burns. Rest gently as we prepare to enter the final age of Carthage's independence. A brief, bright twilight before the end. As the dust of battle settles after Hannibal's defeat at Zama, Carthage stands bruised but breathing. The city still gleams beneath the North African sun. Its harbors remain full of ships, though fewer now, and the scent of spices still clings to the breeze. But the power that once stretched across seas has been clipped. Carthage now walks in the shadow of Rome. The peace treaty signed in 201 BCE is suffocating. Carthage must pay Rome a vast indemnity over 50 years. It may not raise an army or wage war even in self-defense without Roman permission. Its fleet is reduced to a symbolic few ships. The city, once proud and unchallenged, now lives as a vassal in all but name. And yet, Carthage adapts. Within its walls, life flourishes again. Freed from military entanglements, the city turns its energy inward, reviving trade, expanding agriculture, and reforming its politics. Under Hannibal's brief stewardship as a magistrate, financial corruption is curbed and revenues stabilize. Though he will eventually be forced into exile by Roman pressure, his reforms leave a legacy of civic strength. By 150 BCE, Carthage has fully paid off its debt to Rome years ahead of schedule. Economically, it rebounds with astonishing speed. Its wealth returns, its merchant fleets grow, its fields bloom once more with wheat, olives, and fruit trees. To an outsider, Carthage seems reborn, but this prosperity does not go unnoticed. In Rome, memories of Hannibal's terror still linger. Senators, especially the elder statesman Cato the Elder, view Carthage's resurgence with alarm. After every speech, Cato ends with the same chilling refrain, "Carthago delenda est Carthage must be destroyed." The tension sharpens over the neighboring kingdom of Numidia. Its king, Massinissa, a longtime Roman ally, begins encroaching on Carthaginian territory. Carthage, forbidden from military response without Roman consent, appeals for justice. But Rome delays. Massinissa continues his raids. Finally, Carthage retaliates without Roman approval. Though the act is born of desperation, it breaks the treaty. Rome now has its pretext. In 149 BCE, Roman legions cross the sea once more. The Third Punic War begins not as a battle between equals, but as a siege. Let us now enter this final hour with reverence. Carthage, though outmatched, refuses to surrender. The Senate sends envoys demanding the city's disarmament. The Carthaginians comply, delivering thousands of weapons and siege engines. But then, Rome makes its final, impossible demand. The entire population must abandon the city, which is to be razed to the ground. This, the Carthaginians cannot accept. Their temples, their tombs, their homes, the soul of their civilization cannot be forsaken. The city prepares for war. Every citizen becomes a defender. Slaves are freed to join the fight. Women cut their hair to make rope for catapults. Even children carry supplies to the walls. For 3 years, Carthage resists. The Roman general Scipio Aemilianus, grandson by adoption of Scipio Africanus, leads the final siege. His forces encircle the city, cutting off supplies. Disease and famine set in. But still, the Carthaginians fight. They rebuild their defenses, they launch sorties, and they resist with a fervor born not only of survival, but of identity. The final assault comes in 146 BCE. Roman forces breach the city walls. What follows is brutal. House-to-house combat rages for days. Fires consume entire districts. The streets run with ash and silence. In the end, the city falls. The Romans kill or enslave the remaining population tens of thousands. The temples are looted. The harbor is emptied. The walls are torn down, stone by stone. The Roman Senate orders that the site be cursed, and according to legends, sewn into the earth to prevent rebirth. Though modern scholars doubt this detail, the symbolism is powerful. Carthage, the proud city of traders, explorers, generals, and poets, is no more. Let us linger now, gently, among the ruins. Beneath the soot and rubble lies a history vast and rich, a city that blended Phoenician roots with African soil, a people who crossed seas and forged empires, a culture that built in silence, fought in desperation, and died with dignity. Rome will later build a new city atop the old ruins, Colonia Julia Carthago, which becomes one of the most important centers in Roman Africa. Christianity will take root here, and centuries later, St. Augustine will preach in its basilicas. But the Carthage of Dido, of Hanno, of Hannibal at Carthage remains a ghost beneath the marble. And so we pause. The fires have died out. The winds return. The Mediterranean laps gently against the shore. Olive trees grow where forums once stood. In the hush of night, the stars look down upon a city that was and is no more. But though Carthage fell, its story did not end. Its memory endures in Roman texts, in archaeological shards, in language and legend. It lives in libraries, museums, and in minds. Even now, as you rest, you carry the echo of a civilization whose walls no longer stand, but whose spirit still speaks. Drift now into deeper calm as we reflect on what was left behind and what remains. We arrive now at the final chapter, not of Carthage's destruction, but of its remembrance. For though its stones were shattered and its libraries lost, Carthage did not vanish entirely. Like all great civilizations, it transformed from presence into memory, from nation into narrative. In the centuries that followed its fall, Carthage lingered in the Roman imagination, sometimes as a cautionary tale, sometimes as a source of fascination. Roman authors could not forget Hannibal's genius or the city's former glory, yet they often painted it in shadows, shaped by Rome's victory. To many Romans, Carthage was the other, a mirror of what they feared they might become. It was foreign, Eastern, and mysterious. Latin poets like Virgil wove Carthage into epic myth, crafting Queen Dido as a tragic figure, abandoned by Aeneas, the Trojan hero who would become Rome's progenitor. In the Aeneid, Dido curses Aeneas with eternal enmity, foreshadowing the Punic Wars themselves. But this Dido is not the Dido of Phoenician lore. She is a Roman creation, shaped for their purposes. And yet even in this reimagining, Carthage remains present, like a mountain reflected in still waters, distorted but unmistakable. As the Roman Empire absorbed North Africa, the site of Carthage was reborn. In the 1st century BCE, Julius Caesar and later Augustus founded a Roman colony on the ruins, Colonia Julia Carthago. This new Carthage flourished, becoming one of the most important cities in the Western Empire. Its population swelled, its forums and amphitheaters rose. Christianity found deep roots there. By the 4th century CE, the city was a thriving Christian center. Church fathers like Tertullian and Cyprian wrote and preached in its streets. St. Augustine, bishop of nearby Hippo, often traveled through it. Carthage became a site not of war, but of worship. But history, ever cyclical, brought new storms. In the 5th century, the Vandals' Germanic invaders captured the city. Later, the Byzantine Empire reclaimed it, only to lose it again in the 7th century to Arab forces during the Islamic conquests. This time, the city did not recover. Carthage was gradually abandoned, its stones repurposed, its name buried beneath centuries of silence, and yet, not lost. In the modern era, Carthage was slowly rediscovered first through legend, then through the science of archaeology. European travelers in the 18th and 19th centuries began to explore the site near present-day Tunis in Tunisia. They found ruins, broken columns, fragments of mosaics, the outline of ancient harbors. In the 20th century, excavations revealed more. The famed Tophet, where urns with the ashes of infants and small animals were discovered, raised new debates about Carthaginian religion and ritual. Scholars wrestled with the question, was it a sacred cemetery or a place of sacrifice? Much remains uncertain. Carthage, it seems, still keeps some secrets. Today, the site of Carthage is quiet. Sunlight filters through olive groves. The sea glistens just beyond the ridge. Tourists walk among foundations of Roman villas, Byzantine basilicas, and Phoenician walls. The National Museum of Carthage houses relics that whisper of millennia, past jewelry, amphorae, statues, coins. Each artifact is a fragment, each fragment a story. What, then, is the legacy of Carthage? It is a testament to the power of trade, to the ability of a seafaring people to shape the known world through exchange, diplomacy, and culture. It is a story of resistance, of a city that stood against the mightiest empire of its age. It is also a story of fragility, how greatness, once achieved, can be erased by conquest and time. But above all, Carthage reminds us that civilizations do not disappear. They transform. Their voices echo in the languages we speak, the cities we build, the questions we ask. Carthage lives not just in history books, but in the memory of the world. As you rest now, gently and deeply, imagine the moonlight over ancient Bursa Hill. Picture the silhouette of a temple, long gone, rising against the stars. Hear the quiet lap of water in the harbor, the soft chant of a priest, the cry of a child in the marketplace. Imagine the scent of cedar wood and citrus, the feel of sun-warmed stone beneath your hand. Carthage is there, in the quiet. The wind still carries its name, the sea remembers its sails, and you curious traveler of history have brought its memory to life once more. Sleep now, wrapped in the folds of time. Let the sands of Tunisia cradle your dreams. Let the voice of history guide you gently through the night. Carthage is not forgotten. It never was.